Welcome to Dental Business RX. Practice success in 30 minutes or less.
Thank you for calling ABC Dental.
So you've just finished a new patient exam and it's time to present the treatment plan. This patient needs a few fillings, 4 crowns, and an implant. It's a decent-sized case. You present the treatment plan and it comes to decision time and you hear, I want to think about it, or I'm very busy right now, or I can't do this right now, or this is too expensive, or I only want to do what insurance covers. And while all of these sound very nice, what do they ultimately mean? No. They all mean no. And you might walk away from more than a few of these types of treatment presentations and think that you need more high-quality new patients, or your patients can't afford good dental treatment, or your patients have a low dental IQ, or your patients don't care about their teeth. And sure, there are cases where a person may not care about their teeth, and there may be cases where you just have a person who's just not a very nice person in your dental chair. But for the most part, most people are generally okay or nice, and they actually do care about their health somewhat. So why do people say no to something that they really need? Well, that's what I want to talk about in this episode. I want to get into the real reason behind most of the no's that you're hearing, despite how they're couched. I want to think about it. And even more, I want to talk about what to do to hear more yeses. My name is Jeff Bloomberg, and I'm your host. And to make things simple, let's look at the reason people normally say no to things. And it really comes down to 2 basic reasons. The first one, which I'm not going to really address in this episode, but I've talked about before, is there's a legitimate reason for them to hold off right now. They're refinancing their house, or they're leaving town for 3 months. But they'll usually tell you about this. And if you remember episode 82, I talked about how to address patient objections. I'm sure you remembered it right off the top of your head, right? But in episode 82, I went over how to address patient objections, and I explained what a legitimate or a real objection was. But the reason for most of your no's is most likely a lot simpler than you think. The reason most patients say no is they don't actually understand what you are trying to do, and therefore can't associate the value to it, or with it rather. They don't understand. And let's define understand. The definition of understand is to grasp the meaning and significance of something. So it doesn't mean that you just know what it means. I know I've used mean twice there, sorry. But it means you grasp the significance. How important is this relative to other things? A patient would then understand, oh, well, this treatment's a lot more important than buying that new consumer product or going on that cruise right away. They would be able to see the importance associated with getting their treatment done if they grasp the significance of it. That's the whole point. Meaning and significance. And you can see this even with training. You've probably done some variation of this. You've told your receptionist, smile when you answer the phone. So you've given them an action to do. I have to smile while I answer the phone. Smile, right? I'm trying to smile as I'm doing this, on audio. But you haven't really explained why. Why is it important that they smile when they answer the phone, or that they're nice when they answer the phone? You may think it's common sense. And to a degree, you're right, but not everybody has common sense, especially somebody who's new in the workforce. They don't know what it's like in a professional environment. You haven't actually explained why. They haven't understood the significance. The reason why it's important that a receptionist is friendly and welcoming is because they're the first point of contact in the business. And a person calling in is going to develop their attitude. Their whole attitude about our business is going to begin to be developed based on that first phone call. So how you answer the phone, if you sound unwelcoming or irritated or rushed or upset that they called, that's going to change their viewpoint of our business. Any type of training. Let's say you have a receptionist, and I've used this example before, and you walk into a dental practice. You're a fly on the wall, or you're walking in as a consultant and you're watching their front desk operate. And there's a patient who just walked in the door standing at the desk. The phone is ringing, and you see the receptionist who's seen the patient and hears the phone, by the way. The receptionist is busy filing something. They're filing a chart. Let's say they're still on paper charts. you would go, what's wrong with this receptionist? Well, they just don't understand what would be the most important thing. Anybody who understands basic business or dentistry, they would go, okay, well, I got to say hi to the person who just walked in, say, excuse me a second, pick up the phone, and file when I have time. They can't assign importances to these three things, meaning which is the most important, the live person in front of me. The second most important thing is the phone, and the third most important thing is the paper. Might not be third, it might be fourth or fifth, because there could be two other things that I haven't talked about. So you see this with training. A person doesn't understand until they grasp the meaning and the significance of whatever you're trying to teach them. Well, the same thing applies with your patients to a degree. And I would do this as a thought exercise with you. Think about something that you have purchased. It doesn't matter whether it was a consumer good or something for your practice or a service of some kind or whatever. And something that you had to go a little bit above and beyond to get, not a pack of gum, right? You wanted it. If somebody really wants something, they really want it, I really need this, I really want it, they will go above and beyond in order to obtain it. You've probably seen patients who really wanted treatment, but they had no way to pay for it, but they somehow figured it out. They had their mom co-sign on a care credit application or something like this. In other words, if somebody really wants something, they really understand it, they can see the value of it, they will go above and beyond to get it. So this all comes back to this basic understanding. And to sort of accentuate this point, there was an article in 2007, and I use this in Sales and Communication Seminar C when I talk about the subject of communication. There's an article in 2007 in the New York Times by their health writer, Jane Brody. And the point is, she pointed out that patients remember, this was based on a national survey, patients remember less than half of what a doctor explains during a visit. Less than half. Educational level notwithstanding. It doesn't matter whether they finished high school or they have a doctorate, unless it's a doctorate in dentistry, obviously. They remember less than half of what the doctor says. So I want you to think with that for a second, that the average patient walking into your practice walks out and did not understand or did not remember more than 50% of what you said. That's the current scene. Unless you're really good at communicating and your team is really good at communicating. So we have a bit of a situation here. The patient doesn't, quote unquote, get it. That's why you'll go through the whole treatment presentation. They say, oh yeah, but I really want to buy this purse or this TV or go on this cruise. And you go, well, gosh, what's wrong with this person? You take it personally. This is a bad patient. They don't care about their teeth. It's none of these things. They just don't get it. So why don't they get it? Why don't they understand? Well, it comes down to ultimately communication. And a couple things about communication. Number one, I've toyed with the idea of doing a whole episode on the podcast about communication, and it does not translate well to a podcast because in order to teach it properly, it needs to be a little visual. There needs to be diagrams and things of that nature. But that being said, I would say two things. One, if you want to learn how to communicate, I'd recommend two things. First thing would be ultimately come to the MGE Communication and Sales Seminars. I'll put a link to it on the episode webpage. That's what we talk about, folks, how to properly present treatment and how to communicate effectively with your patients. And that's why it gets these fantastical results, the 300,000 average increase in year one. While you're waiting to do that, if you want to at least get a primer on communication, get into the subject a bit, you can check out our online platform, DDS Success. There's a course on there called Effective Communication. I did the course. I'm not trying to promote myself necessarily there, but I get into the specifics. Here's what communication is. This is how it works. These are the mechanics of it. It does not translate very good into a podcast episode. Therefore, I'm not going to do an episode on it. I am going to do more episodes on specific sales techniques, but that one does not translate as well. But that being said, the reason I'm pushing this so hard is because you're trained as a healthcare professional, but you're going to have some degree of communication training because a lot of not just your success and your livelihood, but your patient's health depend on how effective you are at communicating. So how does this lack of understanding develop? What are the communication errors or what are the problems that create this lack of understanding? Well, let's look at some of the biggest culprits. The first one is when you're explaining treatment, what or why you want to do. I'm sorry, I'm going to say that again, Rachel. The first one is when you didn't explain during whatever explanation that you're doing what it is you want to do, why you want to do it, and what the ramifications are if you do nothing. In other words, what happens if we do nothing or wait? So the patient's missing a tooth, and you told them the other one might super erupt. Why is that a big deal? Maybe to you it's a big deal because you're a dentist. Maybe to your staff because they understand it. The average patient, it's in the back of my mouth. What do I care if the tooth's missing? I mean, maybe they want to fix it, but the idea of it being something I have to handle now, not 5 years from now, because implants are expensive, why is it a big deal? What are the potential effects of me doing nothing about this? There's that crown the patient needs. Well, what are the potential effects of me doing nothing? The tooth could crack. I could end up losing the tooth. I could end up needing a root canal, which is going to cost me another $1,000, $1,200. These are things that patients I don't understand the condition. It wasn't made, it wasn't done, it's explained in such a way that I really got it. And then if I don't do anything about it or I wait, what's potentially going to happen? That's the first biggest culprit normally. The second is not enough time during the explanation. And if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, you know how I feel about dedicating the correct amount of time when presenting treatment. You have time allocated on your schedule for treatment, and you have time allocated on your schedule for diagnosis. Very rarely do doctors or dentists rather allocate time to actually present treatment, but it is something that requires time. And if you want a simple way of thinking with it, if I asked you to spend, let's say you're asking this patient to spend $8,000 or $9,000 and they make, $60,000 a year. You're asking for 1/6 to 1/7 of their yearly income in 5 minutes if you're not spending time to actually explain it. That's just not a good. Would you do that if you think of your yearly income? And if I asked you for 1/6 or 1/7 of it, and I talked to you about whatever I wanted you to buy for 5 minutes, would you buy it? Most likely not. You have to allocate enough time to not just explain what's wrong, what you found, what the condition is, what happens if we do nothing, what it is you actually want to do to fix it, but you also have to allocate enough time for them to be able to ask questions, handle considerations. I'm worried about how is going to hurt, how is it going to look, anything that might be on their mind. This takes time. Third culprit here, or reason rather, is using too much technical jargon during a treatment presentation. I've hit on this before. I wouldn't use words like abscess. I'd use words like infection. I wouldn't give them tooth numbers unless it was absolutely necessary. Oh, you have a problem on number 4 on the distal surface. I wouldn't get into that. Explain it in a way they can understand it and they can see it. Which brings me to this next point, which is the condition itself and the treatment in their mind is somewhat inaccessible. You tell them they need an implant, but what does an implant look like? Well, it's a screw, but I'd have an actual implant in my treatment plan presentation. I'd show them one. Here's an implant. Explain what this goes in your gum. This goes into your jawbone or to your gum bone, right? This is how I do it. They should actually see these things. What's a crown? You can use old lab cases. You can use your intraoral camera. If you're explaining that a tooth is broken, crack, or a cusp is broken off, have them see it on an intraoral camera. Make it accessible to them. This is all part of building understanding with them. And the next reason has to do with how you yourself are communicating. So take a look at something for a second. So I want you to imagine you've just put yourself in an environment where maybe it's a medical environment, okay? And you're seeing the doctor and you really respect this doctor. And because people, when they go into your office, mouths can be dirty, mouths can have stains. People are self-conscious about how their mouths look. And in comes the doctor, and the doctor's real judgy, or seems rushed, or seems, aloof, has a bit of an attitude, etc. That doesn't go over very well, and it doesn't make you comfortable. So part of this is making the patient comfortable communicating with you. And I want to point something out in just the very definition of co-communication. What does co mean? Co means together. Co means together. Think of words like cooperation, coordination, cooperate. We're working together. Well, communication is two ways. It's you to them and them to you, right? So if you come in and you seem judgy or aloof or upset or rushed, I'm not going to feel very comfortable asking you questions, am I? Well, we're not communicating then, folks. So How would you want someone to be if they were handling you? I know how I would want somebody to be, and that's how I aspire to be when I deal with somebody else. I try to be friendly, try to be understanding, I try to be accommodating. I want the person to feel comfortable talking to me, regardless of what's going on. If they're horribly embarrassed about whatever condition they're explaining to me, I have to create a comfortable enough environment so that they can explain it and not feel that I'm judging them or being critical of them. You'd be surprised, and it's usually the person who's last aware of this is, in this case, would be the doctor. You're not aware how a patient may look to you with all of this respect, and they're afraid to say things to you, or they're afraid that you're going to see that stain on their tooth. They did a bad job in their home care. Patients get like this. The funniest story I heard, I had a client of ours, also a friend, tell me she'd practiced for about 30 years. She's retired now, but she took over her dad's practice. And the first patient she saw on day one was one of her dad's patients for, 20 years before, older lady. And the lady that morning, because she was seeing the new doctor, had brushed her teeth with Ajax. And for you younger folks, Ajax is an abrasive, tile cleaner. I think it even scratches some tile. She brushed her teeth with Ajax because she wasn't going to walk in with dirty teeth. So that's what's walking into your practice. Patients walking in, they may be a bit concerned. You're going to think that they're doing a bad job, or they're embarrassed, or whatever. So create an environment where the patient is comfortable actually speaking with you. Be friendly. Be accessible. I'm not saying to joke around and act as if, that they're your best bud or something like this. But I am saying be friendly. Think of how you would like to be treated. Be nice. Talk to them like a person, and you'd be surprised how many people actually open up at that point and communicate. Because here's the problem. When the patient doesn't understand what's going on, doesn't understand what treatment you want to do, doesn't understand what happens if I do nothing, and then you hit them with the price tag, well, this is going to be $8,000, well, then they get a bit worried because we have things like the internet, and there's lots of bad reviews. They can read about everything on the internet and how everybody's a scammer and this and that and whatever, and they just came there today to get their teeth cleaned, and now you want $8,000, and they're just going to leave you a negative review. It also creates trust issues at that point because you weren't able to actually explain it all properly. And the one thing, remember, that they always will understand is the cost, because that they have complete subjective reality on money, but they don't on this treatment you're explaining. It's very nebulous until it actually gets performed. So you want to make that treatment as solid and real to them as you can, as well as the condition that they have and what happens if they do nothing. So what do you do to ultimately handle this lack of understanding with patients? In the long term, my suggestion is get trained to communicate. And I'm not saying this just to sell the MGE communication and sales seminars or to get you to subscribe to our online platform, DDS Success. That's not why I'm saying this. Oh, you notice how I placed that there at the end? I'm really not. It's just that your livelihood and your patient's health depend on how well you communicate to a large degree. So you're going to have to become really good at this process if you want to make sure that you increase your amount of treatment acceptance. Now, that being said, what are some things that you could start doing today? Well, here are 6 basic things. First one is, I would not present a treatment plan unless you have time to properly explain and close it. I'm not saying to never present the treatment plan. Schedule the patient to come back or schedule time so that you actually have adequate time to do it. There's lots of ideas on how to do this. I've talked about them on the podcast before. You can carve some time out in your mornings before you see your first patient, which is nice sometimes. If your first patient has to cancel at the last minute, you might actually get to start some of these cases. Or you can schedule time right after lunch. Ideally, you want this time where you're doing treatment presentations to be uninterrupted. You don't want to be pulled out of the room. You want to be able to be focused on this patient completely at 100%. Second thing is, don't use heavy dental terminology. Use communication and language that will actually be accessible to the patient. Third thing is, ensure your patient understands their condition fully. So this is what's wrong. So how would you make sure that they really get it? Obviously, if they have a missing tooth, they'll get it, but they don't necessarily see, well, if I don't fix this missing tooth, what's going to happen? That's part of understanding the situation. If there's a broken tooth, you can show them that on an intraoral camera, etc. This is sometimes tough with gum disease, because it doesn't hurt. Obviously, with pain, it's easy to explain. But there's ways to make that more solid or real to a patient. Fourth thing is, make sure they get what happens if they don't do anything to fix it now. and why you want to do it now. So here are the potential ramifications or consequences of doing nothing about this now. I wouldn't say it like that, but I would say, look, this is why I want to do this now. Here's what I'm concerned about, and you should be completely honest about this. Meaning, if you really are concerned that tooth is going to crack, I would tell them that. If you're not, I wouldn't. Be completely 100% transparent. If you think that there's a chance that tooth could crack, you've seen patients come in before and it's cracked, could not crack. What's a big deal if it cracks? Well, if it cracks down the middle, down to the root, you got problems. You see, make sure that they fully get this. And the last 2 points here is be friendly and accessible. Like I've been saying, you're the doctor, patients respect you. So make sure that the patient is comfortable. Make the patient comfortable communicating with you. And of course, I've mentioned this in numerous episodes about treatment presentations. You should always mention the fee. The fee has a lot more weight coming from the doctor. It always does. Even if you've got which you should have a treatment coordinator in the room with you when you're presenting the treatment plan, but you should go over the fee. This treatment plan is $11,000. We're expecting your insurance to pay $1,500. Now, you can take it further than that. I've talked about that in other episodes. But at minimum, I would suggest that you at least mention the fee. That in and of itself can increase your close percentage. And like I said, getting yourself fully trained on this is the logical, long-term, profitable solution. But you might find if you just do a few of these things that I've discussed, that you'll start hearing more yeses even before you get trained, which is, a win in and of itself. Anyway, shorter episode this week. I wanted to throw this out there because I've talked about case acceptance on and off throughout the history of this podcast, but I still get, obviously, because I'll run into newer clients or newer doctors who have never heard some of this stuff before. I wanted to throw this out there because really in I don't know, if I had to estimate, 80% of your cases, the reason why patients are saying no is they just don't get it. Like I said, there are legitimate reasons patients can't do things. Maybe there's a true financial barrier that they just cannot overcome. But you'll find when a person has a legitimate reason for not doing something, and by legitimate, I don't mean, or real reason. I mean, it's real. There's a real reason they can't do it. I'm leaving town for 3 months. My plane leaves tomorrow at 9 a.m. That's why I can't do this big treatment plan right now. That's real. There's nothing you're going to do about that. That is what it is. Or I'm refinancing my house right now, so I can't apply for credit, but my house should close in 3 weeks. You'll find with these legitimate or real reasons, a person is more communicative. With these other reasons, it's just a nice way of saying no, rather than just saying no. Very rarely will you explain something to a patient and just have them say no. That just doesn't happen. They're going to say something nice to let you down easy. So hopefully apply a little bit of what you learned this week. Get trained as a communicator. That's the long-term solution, and you'll hear some more yeses. I hope this helps. I'll put the links to the MGE Communication and Sales Seminars on the episode webpage, as well as DDS Success. And if you have any questions about MGE, you can find us online at mgeonline.com or call us at 800-640-1140. Folks, have a great week, and we will see you at the next episode.